Hi, I'm Stuart from HiFi Pig. We're here at Audio Show Deluxe 2026. I'm with Caelin and Richard from Shunyata Research. They're here with Boyer and Guillaume, who I've just had a nice chat with. We're just going to have a bit of a chat about what you guys do, what your philosophy about cables and the rest is. So, first of all, Shunyata Research is a bit of an unusual name. It's Sanskrit for... Tell us, where does the name come from?
I mean, you traveled a lot. You had a kind of a background in studying different cultures and.
Well, I was always interested in philosophy and different religions, and been to India, studied with the gurus, and learned yoga. So yeah, Sanskrit. Shunyata means roughly it's like the emptiness or stillness from which all creation comes from or emanates from.
So that would suggest that your philosophy of cables is to get rid of noise?
Well, I didn't start off to make cables.
Okay.
First of all, I was an audiophile, probably still am, and spent quite a lot of money on audio, and still wasn't happy with the sound.
Okay.
Very much like many of the people you talk to, yeah. And so I was expert in computers and networks and RF signals, and I worked with the military when I was younger in detecting very low-level signals that supposedly you couldn't pick up.
And that was in Berlin, am I
I was
right
in Berlin,
thinking?
Germany, yeah. And so I set about discovering why my audio system didn't sound very good. And I would go to the dealer and they'd said, oh, well, you need the latest turntable. So I'd already spent $10,000 on the current one. Well, all you have to do is spend another 5 or another 10, and that will solve all your problems. And of course, it didn't. And so I just wanted the music to sound natural. Was that too much to ask? Apparently, it was.
Okay.
So I set about trying to discover, well, why does the system sound electronic or artificial? And in the research that I did, I was led towards power supplies and power systems, and found out that if the power system wasn't perfectly stable, if there was any noise in the power supply, of course, then the audio signal that's simply modulating that power signal, the noise would ride on top of it. So I set about trying to make products for myself that would make my audio system sound better. And so the first thing I created was a power distributor, or power conditioner. And then I had some friends that were audiophiles also, and I made some things for them. And then I had a dealer that I would regularly get products from, and he tried some of them and he liked them. So I still had my normal job. But then it got to the place where I was spending too much time making products for other people. And so I decided to retire my profession and pursue my avocation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it very much a vocation?
Yeah, I consider it a hobby.
Okay. Still?
Still.
Okay.
Yes,
That's a nice
and
place to
we're
be.
constantly improving.
Okay.
So I'm still on the quest, but I think we're much closer than when I started 25 years ago.
Okay. And what's your background, Richard?
Well, he mentioned he saved me from the car industry. For me, I kind of worked my way through life. I didn't necessarily pursue education because I saw a lot of family members and older friends go and pay $60,000 or $80,000 for an education and then go back to the job that got them through their career in college. So for me, I wanted life experience and service industry with regards to Safeway or Costco. I went up to Alaska and commercially fished. Came back, I built fiberglass boats before, and then I got into the car industry, and that's when I met Caelin and his wife, Nina.
And that was 18 years ago, yeah?
About 20 years ago is when I first met them, and they bought some cars from me, and I interacted with some of the other people from Shunyata, and offered me a job and saved me 2007, 2008, right when we had one of the last big economy dips.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about audio. I didn't know anything about the industry. I was a little intimidated and a little insecure coming in, but Caelin reassured me that that's good. You don't have any bias. It's a blank slate and we'll teach you. We'll teach you our perspective.
So,
Which,
from your perspective, what does Shunyata bring to the table? I think I know your answer to this, that it brings nothing, but
for me, I'm not categorized as an audiophile. I'm a communicator. I'm a social person to build relationships and take care of customers, and to have a company that's a U.S. built, lifetime warranty, and exceed all expectations at all price points makes me even better at my job, because for me, it gives me goosebumps just to think about the relationships I've built with customers and what our products do. So what it's for me is it's maximizing a customer's budget in the system that they have by teaching them, sharing with them, and educating them the value of the foundation, which has to do with power, grounding, and the whole interconnected chain of cabling to pass signal or to provide power can make or break a system. And to work through hundreds of customers over the years and share what Caelin has created with them, it's an epiphany. And the relationships and the happiness we bring and the feedback we get is, bar none, fills my bucket every day. It's phenomenal.
I think it's quite interesting. I'm from a sales background, and it's very difficult to sell something that you don't believe in.
100%.
And you can tell immediately that you believe
It's
100%
wild.
in this.
And it's a Pepsi challenge. Like, I don't want a customer to buy from me because I'm a good salesman. I want them to buy from me because we work with them, we help facilitate or encourage evaluations, and our products sell themselves. I mean, 100% of the time.
So just to readers that don't know Shunyata, watchers that don't know Shunyata, what are your products?
From power cables to power distribution to ground systems, and then truly it's signal systems, so speaker interconnect and digital interconnects. And then there's a lot of supporting products for isolation, vibration management with cabling.
So it's a whole holistic
It's
system
It
that
is
you're selling.
a whole loom, and I call it the mullet a little bit. It's not the.
You call it the what,
The
sorry?
mullet.
Okay.
It's the party in the back that nobody really looks at.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And sometimes too, people walk into a room and the first thing they say is what are the speakers? And what's interesting too is when I've learned this, not through too many personal experiences, but just from customer feedback, what the system is built off of makes or breaks really the potential that a system can have in that emotional attachment, the detail, the decay, all the aspects of how every individual describes a system. I found we can really dial that in and maximize a customer's budget. That's the way I look at it.
And is that because your cables and ground management, all the rest of it, are allowing the music to come from nothing? Which is what the name means. That's my take on
Caelin's
it.
probably better at describing this, but our products allow for the components and the speakers, the system as a whole, the boxes, to sound the way the designer, the manufacturer intended them to sound.
Okay.
It's not a product that colors the sound. We're trying to be completely neutral and allow everything to sound the way it was intended to.
Okay. And how many levels of cables and things do you do?
Roughly 5.
Okay.
Yep. So we've got our entry-level Gamma series. Below that's Venom, and Gamma and Venom kind of work together as the first step. And beyond that, we get into Theta, and then Alpha, Sigma, Omega, all the new X series product.
Okay. Venom's a fairly aggressive sounding name compared to the others.
You know, Caelin was pretty good at naming for the first, probably 15, 20 years of the company, where people were like, hey, it's snake oil. And he's like, well, fine, I'll call them snakes.
Okay. Very cool. Very good. So how do you counteract that, the snake oil thing?
Well, we
Sit down and
we
listen
just
to
ask
it?
people to try it.
It's
I mean,
experience.
That's the key.
Yeah.
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 I have to say, I'm from a studio background.
Sure.
And my belief in cables was 0. 6mm Van Dam, that would do for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I sat down and listened,
Yeah.
and it was an epiphany.
Well, you know that recording engineers and people from the pro industry are probably the most critical of all, because many of them are engineers or do have a scientific understanding, and so they're the most skeptical of all. So we're very proud of the top recording engineers in the world that are using our products in their recordings.
Can you name any of the big studios that you're in?
Richard, you're on.
Rick Rubin, James Guthrie, Sony Music Japan. More recently in
David Gilmour.
Yep, David
Historia.
Gilmour. Greg Wells.
Wow.
Are you familiar with Greg Wells?
I'm not, no.
Okay, many Grammy award-winning engineers and remastering studios have used our product, and it's not a pursuit of ours actively to try to find new relationships in the pro recording industry. It's just word of mouth because
tell
those
each
guys.
other.
It's a small
Because
world.
they're a closed community.
Yeah.
So when they find something, you know, some people say, oh, well, you just advertise with Absolute Sound or Stereophile or HiFi Pig. And, oh, you just pay those people off to write nice things about you. Well, when you're a top recording engineer, top studio, we don't have enough money to pay those people to use a product in their recording chain. So they're very particular. And each one of them is individually critical. Just because one of them tells another one something is good, well, it says, well, I'll be the judge of that
Yeah.
in my system, right? And so we're very proud of having, which is arguably some of the finest recording engineers and studios in the world that are using our products. In addition to, we have a medical division where we make products for heart surgery, and it helps the doctors to be able to detect the 22 different heart signals and to be able to use the 3D imagery that they're using when they're doing ablations on the heart. And so our products help. One of the doctors characterized it like this. He said, seriously, I'm not kidding, that your products are actually helping to save people's lives.
Oh, wow.
Because it allows us they're looking through 3D goggles, and they're using probes in the body and vaporizing fatty tissue around the heart and the veins. And so if they make a mistake, they can perforate the heart or go through an artery. And so what our products are doing is, in their realm, is very similar to what we're doing in audio, is we're just reducing the noise so that in audio we can hear the signal, but in their field it's so they can visually see things more clearly.
And I know you've got lots of patents behind you.
Yeah.
What are you allowed to talk about in the way that you do go about reducing noise?
Well, we can talk about any. As you said, we've got many different patents, and we can talk about any of those. Of course, it's patented, so it's published. You can go read the patent yourself. There are some things that, some of our technologies are proprietary. So when I talk to the patent attorneys, they say, well, it's good to patent things, but patents run out in 20 years. For instance, we've had a couple of patents just run out recently. But they said if you can effectively create something, and if you can effectively, quote, hide it so that nobody can duplicate it, that's better than patenting something.
Okay.
Because then those don't wear out.
Okay.
And so there are some things that we call proprietary, and those are the things that we will tell you what they do. We won't tell you exactly how we create the product. But we're probably in our field, we're probably one of the most open manufacturers about what our products are made out of, what the measurements are, and what effect you can expect from it.
And what metals are you using in the cables? Is it?
It differs.
It's different.
It depends on the level, but we use the best possible. For instance, in the cables, we'll use Ono copper, which is a single crystal type. In some of the products, we actually have a silver in the center of the cable and then copper around the perimeter. And we do that because there are some characteristic sounds of copper that lean towards warm and rich, and it has more of a powerful bass sound. But in the silver, you tend to get faster transients and maybe a little clearer, purer sound, but at the expense of maybe it sounds a little strident or it tilts the tonal character. And so we use a combination of both to get more of a balanced sound.
Okay, so when you're designing a new cable or a new range of cables, what's the starting point?
Oh, well, the starting point would be the products that we already have, because for us, that's the reference. We have many competitors, and there's been many competitors come and go over the years. So the competitors that we had 5 years ago, many of those don't exist anymore. And we call it the 18-month internet cycle. There's always somebody new coming up, and you'll see it on the internet, on the blogs, and everybody's talking about it. And then they have a cycle of about 1.5 years of 18 months, and then they're on to the next thing. So through all of that, we have been here and persisted. And you know, you have some of the top brands in the world, like your Transparent. MIT used to be one, but they're kind of going away. Nordost, AudioQuest, Cardis. So I would call those the top in the field.
So, are you enjoying the show? We're on first morning. What do you think of the show?
I'm
so far?
really surprised at the attendance. People were all queued up, waiting to get in. It's interesting. They all appear to be from one demographic.
Really? Who'd have thunk?
Certain generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it looks like everybody's having a good time, and Richard was just telling me how friendly and how nice everybody was, and I agree with that. It's quite a nice show.
Yep.
Yeah.
The warmth,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody is here for the same reason, and they're happy to be here. And
The
that's
idea
cool
was
see.
to allow people to take their time going around the show.
Yeah.
We've kept it below 40 rooms so
Yeah.
that people are not rushed in the rooms. They can sit down and enjoy the music and relax into it.
Yeah.
And which I imagine is sort of part of the philosophy of your cables.
Yes.
Sit down, relax,
Very
and
much so.
relax into the music.
Yes, I'll invite you to come over to the Boyer Room, and you'll feel that when you go in there. It's very busy outside. You know, many of the rooms have the doors open, and they're playing certain kind of music that's saying, come in here, come in here. And if you go down to our room, you'll find you go in there and it's dimly lit and it's very calm. It's like an oasis, and you go in and you can hear some beautiful music.
Yeah, I was speaking to Guillaume earlier, and we've been doing the show now for 4 years, and Guillaume's been doing it from day one.
Yeah.
And time after time, we look at people what are saying online afterwards, and time after time, Boyer's name comes up as one of the best rooms, or the sound of the show, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I also think what Guillaume also brings to the show, he puts effort into how the room feels, and
does.
that's really important to create a vibe, I suppose. If you
Yeah.
want to get a bit hippy dippy about it, but
I like hippy dippy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very important, isn't it, to
Yeah.
give people that space and that time to enjoy something.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we like Guillaume. When we first met Guillaume, he wasn't in the audio industry. He wasn't a distributor. Many of these people have been around for decades, and unfortunately, some of them have lost that sense of being an audiophile if they ever were one, and it just becomes about money. But that's one of the things we really liked about Guillaume is he, like myself, was an audiophile, and like Richard, he's very sincere and very kind and genuine person.
So, Richard, have you...
So we gravitated to him because of that, and just like Richard, we told Guillaume, don't worry. We'll teach you all the jargon, and we'll teach you about audio, but you have, what's important is that you're intelligent, you're creative, you're an artistic person, you love audio, and so we partnered with him many years ago. Ours was the first and only product that he distributed for a while, and he's gone on to other products, and he's been very successful. And we love Guillaume. We think he's fantastic.
He's a good guy.
He is.
Family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, over the years, have you become an audiophile? You said you weren't.
I'm
but-
getting better.
I'm
I've gotten
getting
a lot better. I wasn't confident in my background or my ears in the sense.
Yeah.
I mean, but I also realized out of 100 people that would come out of a room, I would hear 100 different opinions, and each of those opinions, everybody would want to stand on their soapbox and argue against one another why they were right.
Okay.
So I immediately realized my opinion didn't necessarily matter. It's the experience, it's the emotional attachment that people had, and it's their opinion on what they liked that mattered. That was the key. So if I helped facilitate an evaluation for customers and they liked this instead of this, and maybe it wasn't our product, then, I mean, that you won. You've determined what was best for you. You've accepted that the money you're spending brings the value you expect from it, and that's a win. And they just kind of look at me like, well, you're not disappointed? And I'm like, no. I mean, it's a small community. We're all a family. And to help people find that happiness and that comfort in their purchases or in their system. It's our whole goal. I think that's why this industry is so cool, because 80-90% of it is about that.
I think for me, it's bringing joy into people's lives.
100%.
That's what the whole thing is about.
Yep.
And I was saying to someone earlier on, I call the whole the boxes and all the rest of it, they're just machines for joy.
Yep.
And that's all they do.
Yeah.
So when you're designing a new product, do you start with measurements or do you start with your ears? What's the process?
Well, this is a common theme or argument that you'll see. I think some people, they call them objectivist type people, and then there's people that they say they're subjective. Well, when you're engineering a product, you can't engineer something that's technical and not pay attention to measurements and proper engineering. That would be criminal. So you have to start with proper engineering first, okay? But I will tell you that in the context of a high-end audio system, there are some things that you can hear that we don't have any current way of measuring it. So you always have to start with a foundation of proper engineering and measurements, which is what we do. But from there, you can build upon that, and there's some things you can change. For instance, I'll just use our products as an example. We have certain metals and certain purities of metals, and the purities of the metals you can measure, but the correlation to what you hear is contextual. So you can measure impurities in metals, but when you put it in a cable and listen to it through an audio system, that translates into a certain difference in sound quality.
Okay.
So there has to be a correlation. There's many things that you may be able to measure, but have a very poor correlation to audio performance. So what's important is finding the things that have measurable difference or objective difference, and then does it translate to an audio difference? And that's part of the research, is finding those things that you can define and measure or improve to make the overall product sound better.
Okay.
But there are things you can change. For instance, in our products, the dielectrics, that would be the insulation material that you put over the metals. Those have an audible effect on what you hear. But if you were to measure an audio signal, for instance, the frequency response or the signal-to-noise ratio, the bandwidth of it, the phase response, you would find that there's no difference.
Yeah.
But if you measure the product using alternate ways of measuring, so for instance, one of the things I do is I will apply an impulse to the wire, and so I'll put a certain voltage on it and then remove that voltage suddenly, and then you measure the stored energy in the wire itself, because all wire has a self-inductance and a self-capacitance. And so when you apply a signal and then when you remove it, the characteristics of the cable itself, you can call it a resonance, you will see that dissipate like a ringing pattern, and it dissipates to zero. But the dielectric acts to store energy in the electric field. And so when you remove the signal, that dielectric re-radiates that signal back into the cable. So those are some of the things that are unconventional measurements that we use, and then we can draw correlations to those measurements of what people actually hear.
Okay.
And then most people will say, or some people will say that, well, because that's not a normal audio thing that you measure, so like your frequency response and your signal-to-noise ratio, that it's not valid.
Yeah.
But of course it is. It's you're just used to a certain set of measurements that you use, and these all came from the 30s and 40s, when electronics was far less sophisticated and capable, where there were real limitations in bandwidth, where you couldn't achieve certain high frequencies in the audio band, and where the noise level of tube electronics or early transistors was so high that you could audibly hear it. But in the electronics now, we've reduced all of those major distortions to vanishingly low amounts. So even very inexpensive products now have exceptionally good measurements. And so that's nice. That's why we live in a kind of a golden age of audio. But beyond that, they're what I term them as micro distortions. So they're not the major distortions, but they're smaller and more subtle, harder to measure, but they have a very profound effect on someone that has a high-end audio system they've spent a lot of money on, and they're trying to achieve a certain level of realism. They want to be able to sit down and listen and suspend disbelief that they're not actually at that performance. And some of the systems are capable of doing that. I call it's one of the first virtual reality machines is a high-end audio system, but auditory. So if you put it in a dark room and you play the music, you can be transported not just in time, not just in space, but in time to the venue of where that performer was making that performance.
That's a very cool way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah, and if it's a well set up system, you will actually feel like you were there. You can feel the person in the room. You can feel the instrument, like a double bass or a cello. You can actually feel it in the room. And then when it stops and you turn the lights on, you feel disorientated, like you, almost like astral travel, like you've left your body, and actually like remote viewing, you've actually gone to that place. And so a quite proper high-end audio system gives that to you, and I find that audiophiles use it as their relaxation and meditation, where it transports them from this reality that we live in to another time and space.
Absolutely, I completely agree with everything you've said there. Has the way that your methodology for creating cables and grounding products and all the rest of it changed any since digital has become much more prevalent?
Digital, interesting. Well, first of all, there's a fairly high level of skepticism about power cables, and less so about power conditioners, because most people recognize that a power conditioner can have filters in it, it can reduce noise. And so for the last 25 years, we've had a lot of people talk about how can a power cord make a difference. But we've shown many measurements over the years that we use. Some of these measurements are quite profound. When you think about a power cord, the primary function of a power cord is to deliver current to the component. And so if we can show a measurement where the power cord itself is reducing that instantaneous current to the component by as much as 40 to 50%. We're not talking about 0.1% or 1%. We're talking about the power cord can actually impede the delivery of the current by as much as 40%. And then some people rightly say, well, how can that be? Because, we plug it in and it functions properly. But you have to understand how power supplies work. They're not like a fan or a light bulb where they pull current over the entire time of the sine wave of the AC waveform. A power supply has rectifiers in it that open and close, in the case of the UK and in Europe, 100 times a second. So you have 50 hertz power here, and that means the rectifier opens at the peak of the sine wave and the lowest part of the sine wave. So that would be double the line frequency. So 100 times a second, your power supply is opening and closing to the power line. And during that very narrow period of time, all the current for the power supply has to flow during that period of time. So the instantaneous amount of current that flows during that time when the rectifier is open can be 10 to 20 times the average current that goes into the power supply.
Okay.
So that's an impulse of current. So it's a very fast and very quick inrush of current, and then it shuts off, and it waits for the next cycle to come around. So you see, once you start to understand actually how the power supplies work, then you start to see that it's much more complex than what we originally think about. Well, a power cord's just AC and it's only 50 hertz. Well, you can have harmonics that are 50 times the fundamental of the power line frequency. So you can have harmonics
Which is
50
noise.
times 50 hertz.
Yeah.
And all of that's within the audio band.
Okay.
So first of all, the 100 hertz is in the audio band clearly. And so if you have a power supply where it's opening and closing 100 times a second, think of it like this room right here, this ballroom, and there's music playing outside. If someone stood at that door and opened and closed that door repeatedly, open, close, open, close, open, close, it would disturb the silence in this room. And so that's what your power supply is doing. So your power distributor and your power cable interact with that power supply in such a way as to either make that worse or mitigate that.
Okay. Fabulous. I think that's been really fascinating. Thank you for taking time to talk to us.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Take care.